Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you. Today, we're plunging back into the origins of the modern UFO phenomenon. We're really honing in on that crucial year, 1947, and, what happened right after, trying to see how the official story, or maybe the lack of one, truly began to take flight.
That's right. And in this deep dive, we're going straight to the source. We're looking at official FBI documents. These detail the early reports, the eyewitness testimonies, and those initial government reactions to all these mysterious sightings. These original files, some only declassified more recently, they really mark the beginning of what would become this enduring modern UFO phenomenon.
It sounds like a fascinating look at where that mystery really met the military structure, right?
Exactly. And how the sort of pursuit of truth, shrouded in just enough secrecy, really started to take hold.
Okay, so our mission today is to explore this history, but through the lens of the unexplained. We're using these declassified files to understand those very first days of official investigations. You're going to hear about specific accounts. Some are really quite astonishing. Plus, those first attempts to categorize and explain these things, and even some, truly wild claims that somehow found their way into official reports.
Yeah, some of those are pretty out there.
So this is your shortcut to getting well-informed about the very, very beginning of government engagement with these aerial mysteries. It's a period that really set the stage for decades of public fascination and official intrigue. Okay, so public sightings were surging, especially after Kenneth Arnold's famous encounter. The government couldn't just ignore it forever, right? But how did they even start to organize something so chaotic and, frankly, baffling?
Well, the sources show the first critical steps were actually taken by the FBI, and specifically right there in the heart of a lot of early sightings, the New Mexico area.
Okay. New Mexico makes sense.
Yeah. These FBI documents reveal that their district offices, particularly in that region, started pulling together reports of aerial phenomena sightings. This was as early as December 1948.
So what were they actually looking for when they started compiling these? What does that tell us about the early government response?
That's a critical starting point because the FBI documents, they state very explicitly these compilations were, and I quote, not a complete record of all reported information.
Okay, so not everything got in.
Exactly. They only included reports in which sufficient available information was justified for their inclusion. Now, that's a crucial detail. It signals a filtering process right from the get-go.
So what counted as sufficient information back then?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The very act of collecting, then sifting, and then justifying why certain sightings were included. It suggests an early, maybe even urgent, internal recognition that these phenomena were unusual, potentially significant, Even if they had absolutely no concrete explanations yet, they weren't just passively collecting, they were actively looking for patterns, for consistent details, for stuff that warranted a closer look.
And it wasn't just random people calling in, I assume?
No, not entirely. I mean, those reports were definitely part of the mix, but the documents clearly indicate the observers included some highly credible individuals. We're talking scientists, actual special agents of the Office of Special Investigations, the OSI, and other security personnel, too.
Right, OSI. So trained observers.
Precisely. That adds a huge layer of inherent credibility to the raw data they were gathering. It implies that what they were seeing wasn't just, public panic or mass hysteria. It was observations from trained, discerning individuals. Their professional assessments likely contributed to that justification for inclusion in these compiled reports. This was serious, high-level information gathering from the start.
Okay, so it wasn't just a random pile of reports. There was already an implied importance of filtering for reliability, maybe even impact. And once they had those initial curated reports, I guess they started sharing them.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't long before they started circulating to some very high offices and critical agencies.
Who was on that list? Who needed to know about this stuff right away?
The distribution list is, it's remarkably expensive. It really tells a powerful story about the widespread concern these sightings generated at the highest levels. You've got headquarters, 4th Army at Fort Sam Houston, the commanding officer of Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, a key R&D site.
Holloman, right. Makes sense.
Then, the commanding officer of Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratories that points to a need for deep scientific analysis. And this one's big. The director of the Security Division of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission at Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Wow, the AEC. That's serious. Near Los Alamos, no less.
Huge red flag, right, given the sensitivity of atomic research there. And, of course, the local FBI offices in El Paso and Albuquerque, the initial collection points. But it didn't stop there. These reports also went to the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board at the Pentagon and the Research and Development Board's Committee on Geophysics and Geography.
So a really wide net. What does that tell us about the immediate level of concern?
It unequivocally underscores the significant level of concern and the coordinated, almost frantic response across military, scientific, and intelligence agencies right from the very beginning. This wasn't some fringe interest or a local news story. It was clearly seen as a matter of paramount national security.
And the timing. Post-World War II, start of the Cold War.
Exactly the context. The atomic bomb was a fresh, terrifying reality. Any unknown aerial phenomenon, especially near a site like Los Alamos, would immediately set off alarms about potential foreign, probably Soviet reconnaissance, or worse, some advanced weaponry. The rapid inclusion of those elite scientific advisory boards, it suggests a strong, immediate desire for serious scientific analysis. They were considering unknown natural occurrences, or maybe even more unsettling, some kind of advanced technology they couldn't explain. The stakes felt incredibly high.
And speaking of immediate action, you mentioned urgency. There's a teletype message in the sources that sounds pretty demanding.
Yeah.
Uses the phrase "sutil immediate."
Yes, that one's striking. It demands, quote, immediately results of your investigation to identify something.
That's not just asking nicely, is it? It sounds like a scramble.
It absolutely does. That phrasing, sutel immediate, directed to the FBI bureaus in El Paso and Albuquerque. It's a clear sign of extreme urgency. In government and military comms, immediate is top tier. It means action is required now, no delay. This wasn't a polite request, it was a command. Identify this thing now.
So a reactive response.
Yeah,
Trying to figure out what they were dealing with.
definitely. A reactive, almost scrambling response to the unknown. The instruction to identify suggests a pressing need to understand what these objects were. Were they a threat? Did they represent some new capability from a potential enemy? This level of urgency coming from high up shows how seriously they took these early sightings, even before any official explanation existed. It paints a picture of officials genuinely caught off guard. And the FBI documents, they really dig into the nitty-gritty details they wanted from observers. They had specific forms for collecting sighting info. It tells you a lot about their meticulous approach, even that early on.
Right. Can you walk us through what kind of data they thought was crucial? What does that reveal about their concerns?
Sure, the Security Service form from Los Alamos is a great example. It gives us a direct window into their investigative priorities. They weren't just asking for a quick story. They wanted the observer's full name, assigned station, address, phone number basically, full contact info for follow-up. And crucially, they asked for the names of other known observers. That clearly shows an early, deliberate effort to cross-reference accounts, to try and triangulate the data.
Smart. Corroborating evidence.
Exactly. And beyond the basics, the form dug into the specifics. Exact time and date, precise point of observation, direction of the object from the observer, even an estimated distance. This shows a real desire for precise, potentially verifiable data, almost like trying to achieve scientific reproducibility for the observation. And it wasn't just where and when was it. The technical details they sought were pretty sophisticated for the time.
Oh, definitely. It moved into the manner of observation. Was it visual or electronic? Seen from the air or the ground? If an aircraft was involved, they wanted its speed, altitude, type. They also specifically asked about any type of optical or electronic equipment used. That's key for judging reliability, filtering out instrument errors.
Right, understanding the quality of the observation itself.
Yeah, and the level of detail requested, including the exact latitude and longitude if possible, plus identifying info on all observers and witnesses, along with an estimate of reliability and experience for each one. It really points to a rigorous, almost scientific method. They wanted to verify and triangulate everything as thoroughly as possible, not just taking stories at face value.
Building a solid database, essentially.
Right. One designed to withstand scrutiny and maybe, just maybe, identify patterns that could lead to an explanation, or perhaps identify a threat.
And this detailed collection wasn't just about understanding the unknown, right? It seems they were also proactively looking for conventional explanations,
Right.
trying to rule out the mundane first.
Precisely. The forms clearly show that structured attempt. They specifically asked about weather and wind conditions, absolutely vital for ruling out meteorological stuff like weird clouds, inversions, maybe weather balloons.
The usual suspect.
Exactly. That was the first line of defense against misidentification. Then they inquired about any activity or condition, meteorological or otherwise, which might account for the sighting. That's a broad catch-all trying to capture any potential mundane explanation, local experiments, military exercises, known atmospheric effects.
Yeah.
And, testament to their thoroughness, they asked about existence of any physical evidence, fragments, photographs, and the like.
Ah, looking for tangible proof.
Yes. This proactive search for hard evidence, even while collecting these unusual visual reports, shows a measured approach. Let's debunk it with known science if we can, before conceding anything extraordinary. Okay, so it seems pretty clear the FBI's main job here was data collection and then referral, acting as a hub. You mentioned a letter from Hoover himself from July 53 that explicitly states this.
Yeah, that letter from Director J. Edgar Hoover, dated July 24, 1953, to someone in Holland, Michigan. It's a cornerstone document for understanding the FBI's official role. It acknowledges the person's observations, then says quite clearly, "Inasmuch as the matter of the flying saucers is being investigated by the United States Air Force, I am taking the liberty of forwarding a copy of your letter to the Director of Special Investigations, the Inspector General, Department of the Air Force."
Okay, so a direct handoff defines their boundary.
Exactly. It clarifies publicly and internally the FBI's jurisdiction. They weren't the lead investigators for flying discs, they were a conduit. Their job was to receive reports, assess them, and if relevant, forward them to the Air Force, the officially designated lead agency. This centralized the whole investigation under the Air Force.
What were the practical effects of that?
Well, several things. First, it let the FBI focus on its main job while still keeping tabs on a potential national security issue. Second, it centralized the data, theoretically making analysis easier. But it also subtly suggests the FBI collected info, but didn't necessarily dive deep into the scientific or military analysis themselves. They left that specialized work to the Air Force. And this referral policy wasn't a one-time thing. FBI memos later reinforced it to field offices. This was the standard procedure.
So for the public, it streamlined things, but also put the Air Force in charge of the official story.
Pretty much. One military branch became the gatekeeper of official information, which definitely set the stage for later debates about transparency and access. So with the FBI acting as the main funnel for reports, the Air Force really stepped up as the lead agency. This all came together formally with the launch of Project Saucer on January 2010, 1948. A huge moment.
Yeah, Project Saucer.
Yeah.
That's the name most people know. What were its goals, both the stated ones and maybe the unstated ones?
Yeah.
And who was involved?
Project Saucer became the official public face of the Air Force investigation. It was a direct response to that flood of sightings. Launched January 2010, 1948, based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a really important spot, headed by Lieutenant General Benjamin Chidlaw. The New Yorker article we're drawing from details that the Air Force, in setting this up, had, quote, any or all of three things in mind.
Okay, what were they?
First, and probably most obviously, they needed to reassure a jittery populace. Sightings were everywhere. People were anxious, speculating. The government had to look like they were doing something to prevent panic.
Makes sense. Public relations.
Definitely. Second, there was a very real, deep concern about what the Russians might have to do with the reported phenomena. Remember the Cold War context? Any unknown flying object screamed potential Soviet tech or spying. Was it a secret weapon? A new kind of reconnaissance? Terrifying ideas back then.
Right. The Soviet angle was huge.
And third, this one's more intriguing and often debated. The Air Force might have been protecting, for reasons of security, the secret of some experimental flying objects of its own.
Ah, the idea that some sightings were actually their secret projects.
Exactly. They might have worried that sightings of their own classified prototypes were being mixed up with everything else. Or maybe they strategically used the whole UFO buzz as a convenient cover to distract from their own secret aviation work. It was like a multi-level game, managing public perception, national security, and military secrecy all at once. That multi-layered motivation is key. And the people involved reflect that complexity, right? It wasn't just pilots.
Absolutely. The project team was formidable and really diverse. You had astronomers trying to rule out space stuff, meteorologists looking for weather explanations, then physicists, aeronautical engineers analyzing flight paths, and significantly, representatives of the FBI bringing in the raw data.
A real multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah. Their task wasn't simple. It was a mix of old-fashioned detection, interviewing witnesses, gathering field data alongside rigorous scientific analysis. But just as important was public relations, managing the narrative, calming fears. And fascinatingly, they also studied A widespread state of mind.
Psychological factors, too.
Yes, acknowledging that things like mass hysteria or misinterpretation could play a real role in the reports. So it wasn't just technical, it was socio-psychological from the start. They really considered the human element. So initially, Project Saucer seemed to offer a pretty clear, maybe even dismissive conclusion to the public, trying to shut the whole thing down.
You're right. The public dismissal was quite stark. It was definitely a strategic move. In December 1949, after looking into 370 reports over a couple of years, the Air Force publicly called it quits on Project Saucer. They announced that flying saucers were apparitions, and these sightings were basically attributable either to a failure to recognize conventional objects, hoaxes, or to a mild form of mass hysteria.
Wow, pretty definitive. That must have had a big impact.
Huge. It was a pivotal moment in shaping the UFO narrative for decades. It aimed to calm fears, provide an official, rational-sounding explanation, and offer closure. By labeling it misidentification, hoaxes, or hysteria, they effectively tried to strip the flying saucer idea of any real mystery in the public mind. It was a calculated move to manage perception, make the problem seem solved. The official word was nothing to see here.
But the sources we have clearly indicate that public stance wasn't the whole story. There was something else going on behind the scenes.
This is where it gets really interesting, and it lays the groundwork for decades of suspicion, the whole idea of a government cover-up. That same New Yorker article notes, quote, Project Saucer was not actually disbanded, it goes on. Behind tight security, the Air Force announced at the time was not endangered.
So a two-tiered approach. Public dismissal, but secret continuation.
Precisely. A deliberate two-tiered strategy. Publicly, we looked into it, it's nothing. Privately, continued covert investigation under tight security. The implication is massive. While they told the public the mystery was solved, internally, they clearly knew some aspects were still deeply puzzling and needed ongoing secret scrutiny.
And that secrecy just fueled more suspicion later on.
Naturally, the public, or parts of it, sensed the full truth wasn't out there. It meant that while easy cases were dismissed, the truly unexplainable ones, the ones that defied conventional understanding, often with credible witnesses, kept puzzling investigators behind closed doors. This dual strategy created a legacy of distrust that still shapes the conversation around UFOs and government involvement today.
Okay, so despite the official dismissals and attempts to bury the topic, the sheer number and, importantly, the credibility of some sightings meant investigators couldn't just stop looking. Let's get into some specific, really intriguing eyewitness accounts that just didn't fit the easy explanations, starting with the one that gave us the famous name itself.
Right, Kenneth Arnold. June 1947. His sighting is where the term flying saucer actually comes from. He was a private pilot flying near Mount Rainier in Washington state when he saw something extraordinary. 9 tailless aircraft, he reported, flying in a strange formation, like geese, in a diagonal chain-like line as if they were linked together. He described it as a chain of saucer-like things at least 5 miles long, zipping in and out of the high mountain peaks.
Saucer-like things and a look.
He said they were flat and so shiny that they reflected the sun like a mirror. But the truly astounding part, the part that immediately caused problems, was his speed estimate, about 1,200 miles an hour.
1,200 miles an hour in 1947. Just to remind everyone, how fast were planes back then? Was that even conceivable?
Almost incomprehensible. Totally off the charts. Remember, Chuck Yeager wouldn't officially break the sound barrier until later that same year, October 1947, in the experimental Bell X-1. Most planes, military or commercial, were flying well under the speed of sound, maybe 300 to 500 miles per hour. So 1,200 miles per hour, maneuvering like that, with no visible wings or propulsion, it defied everything known about aerodynamics.
What did the experts say about that speed claim?
Well, when the newspapers asked Air Force technicians, they immediately pushed back, saying any object moving that fast would be invisible to the naked eye at Arnold's estimated distance. That technical rebuttal didn't sit well with Arnold. He got pretty resentful, famously saying, "Even if I see a 10-story building flying through the air, I won't say a word about it." He later wrote about it for Fate magazine. His account is just seminal, not just for the term, but the detail, the incredible speed. It pushed the boundaries right away and baffled the experts. The first truly modern UFO report.
And Arnold's sighting, as you said, really opened the floodgates. What other significant early reports pop up in these files? Reports that also challenge the easy explanations.
Oh, the documents are full of them. Equally puzzling accounts from diverse, often credible sources. It felt like the world was suddenly seeing something totally new. For instance, soon after Arnold, someone in Boise spotted a half-circle in shape, clinging to a cloud and just as bright and silvery looking as a mirror caught in the rays of the sun. daylight sighting. Even the lieutenant governor of Idaho saw something odd, a star moving, then two more before they dipped below the horizon. And Project Saucer specifically ruled out Saturn or Mercury later.
So they did check conventional explanations for that one.
They did. Then you had 4 college girls in Portland, Oregon, seeing a group of disks wobbling, disappearing, and reappearing, suggesting weird movement, maybe not solid objects. Multiple witnesses adds weight.
And military personnel saw things too.
Absolutely. Army officers at Fort Richardson, Alaska, reported a spherical object flying through the air at incredible speed and leaving no vapor trail. No vapor trail is a key detail, challenges known propulsion. Fishermen off Newfoundland saw aerial phenomena. A commercial pilot near Battle Creek, Michigan, spotted an oval-shaped silver object. And maybe one of the most compelling, witness-wise. A highly respected naval officer at Lakehurst, New Jersey, the airship base, stared through his binoculars at a brilliant image-making turns that were far too tight for any known aircraft.
Tight turns, high speed, weird shapes. Common themes emerging.
Exactly. These diverse accounts from credible people, different locations, consistently highlighted characteristics, speed, maneuverability, odd appearances that just resisted easy, conventional explanation. It built a cumulative picture of something genuinely anomalous.
And some encounters went beyond just seeing things at a distance. They involved direct interaction, even impact with aircraft, pushing the limits of what could be explained away. The Gorman incident, that's a classic example, right? A military intercept that went dramatically wrong.
The Gorman incident? Yeah. Officially the Fargo incident. October 1948. It's a really disturbing case for the military at the time. The pilot was Second Lieutenant George F. Gorman, North Dakota National Guard. He was flying his P-51 Mustang on a night training flight over Fargo. He encountered this light, described it as about 6 to 8 inches in diameter, bright, pulsating, not just a distant star.
And he was sure there were no other planes.
He confirmed with the tower, no other aircraft nearby except a Piper Cub he could clearly see way below him. This light was something else. As he approached it, it suddenly made a sharp right turn and flew straight at each other, head-on. Gorman had to dive to avoid a collision. The light then passed over my cockpit at about 500 feet. Then it made a full circle about 1,000 feet above. After another near collision, his ship went into a power stall, and the light disappeared to the northwest.
A power stall.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a visual encounter. It was an aerial chase, aggressive maneuvers, and it physically affected his aircraft. That's alarming.
Hugely alarming. This wasn't just a glimpse. It was an active chase. An unknown object outmaneuvered a military fighter. It seemed to react intelligently, evasively, and crucially, it seemed to affect his plane systems, causing that power stall. Think about it. A trained pilot, combat-ready plane, outflown and disrupted by a light. This kind of incident seriously challenged the mass hysteria or misidentification narrative. It involved tangible physical effects and active response. Cases like Gorman's baffled the Air Force and fueled those secret investigations, even while they downplayed other sightings publicly. How could a P-51 be outflown by a light? How could it stall his engine? And beyond those dramatic aerial dogfights, some reports described close-up encounters on the ground with really unusual details, suggesting tangible objects, not just lights.
Yeah, tell us about one of those.
Yes.
Where physical effects were also observed.
Okay, there's a fascinating report from Old Brookville, New York, November 1st, 1957. An object observed from only approximately 500 feet away. That's incredibly close. Allowed for remarkable detail. Described initially as round, about 14 feet high, and orange. The observer said it moved slowly vertically to clear the wall and then to move slowly horizontally a short distance out of his view.
Okay, slow movement, close range. What about the object itself?
This is where it gets really interesting. The description suggests a structured craft, not just a blob of light. Circular in shape, 75 to 100 yards in diameter, and about 15 feet high. It had dark gray stationary top and bottom sections 5 to 6 feet high, and the middle section, about 3 feet high, appeared to be a rapidly moving component producing a continuous hum similar to an airplane propeller, but extending the circumference of the vehicle.
Whoa, a rotating middle section, producing a hum.
Yeah, not silent, a specific sound signature. And the noise emanating from the vehicle was similar, but of somewhat lower pitch than the noise previously heard, maybe indicating a change in operation. But here's the kicker. The engine of the tractor again stalled on this occasion.
Engine stalling again. Just like Gorman's plane, maybe?
Exactly. That detail provides a concrete physical effect, moves it beyond just sight and sound into direct interference. Electromagnetic, maybe? Who knows? But it strongly implies a tangible material object, not an illusion. These persistent, unexplainable sightings with detailed descriptions and physical effects forced officials to consider theories way outside the box because conventional explanations just didn't cut it.
So, faced with all these confounding reports, they obviously tried to apply known science first, right? Rule out the mundane before jumping to weird conclusions.
Absolutely. Right from the start, there was a real effort to apply scientific rigor. Our sources show a University of New Mexico expert reporting that one phenomenon does not appear to be of meteoric origin. That's significant because meteors are an easy explanation for bright, fast objects. Ruling them out early means some reports had characteristics that just didn't fit.
So, not just meteors.
No. And furthermore, the OSI, the Office of Special Investigations, actually contracted with Alamogordo, New Mexico to make scientific study of the unexplained phenomena. That shows a serious, funded commitment to understanding this stuff, not just dismissing it. Later, the documents note observations near sensitive installations were a cause of concern. That's national security driving the investigation, not just curiosity.
Any specific examples of scientists debunking conventional ideas?
Yes, Dr. Lincoln LaPaz, a well-known astronomer and expert on meteors from the University of New Mexico. He analyzed an object seen by someone named Stanfield. Based on calculations of angular velocity and diameter, LaPaz concluded unequivocally it was not the moon, not Venus or any other planet, and it was not a bright fixed star slightly out of focus. This kind of systematic scientific dismantling of conventional explanations meant the phenomena weren't easily dismissed. For some scientists, they remained a genuine puzzle. Okay, so scientists were engaged. But still, the most common official explanations leaned towards misidentifications or natural phenomena, didn't they? Trying to keep things grounded.
Right. While some sightings clearly stumped them, the official line often defaulted to the mundane, probably to reassure the public, avoid panic. The Air Technical Intelligence Center, ATIC, at Wright-Patterson, they handled the research initially stated that approximately 90% of the reported sightings can be discounted as products of the imagination and as explainable objects such as weather balloons, etc. That set a powerful tone for dismissing most reports.
90% is a lot.
It is. And one of the most prevalent theories used to explain both radar hits and sometimes visual sightings was temperature inversion reflection.
Weather stuff bending radar or light.
Exactly. When a layer of warm air traps cooler air below, it can bend radar signals or light. Ground objects can appear reflected off that layer. It can create radar returns as sharp as that received from an aircraft, with speeds seeming to range from 0 to fantastic speeds as the reflection moves or the atmospheric layer shifts.
This theory alone, plausible as it was, apparently led to hundreds of fruitless intercept efforts. Pilots chasing ghosts created by the weather.
Wow. So natural phenomena could genuinely mimic weird stuff.
Definitely. The Oak Ridge, Tennessee incident in January '51 is a perfect example. Air Force jets got a radar lock on something at 7,000 feet. But during 3 passes trying to close in, their radar kept leading them first upward and then down toward a specific point on the ground. Clearly a ground reflection, not a real airborne target. It's a great reminder of how easily even trained observers and fancy equipment could be fooled, making the job of finding genuinely anomalous stuff really hard.
Okay, but what about harder evidence, like photographs? You'd think those would be tougher to explain away. How did Project Saucer handle photos?
Even photos faced intense scrutiny and often got dismissed. There's a compelling example from Plateau, Arizona. A man took 2 pictures of a flat gray object spiraling up and down in the sky at maybe 400, 500 miles per hour. The prints were rushed to Project Saucer. And guess who they brought in to look at them? Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Irving Langmuir.
Oh, Nobel laureate for UFO photos.
Yeah, a highly respected physicist. Langmuir learned a thunderstorm had just happened before the photos were taken. His conclusion: they were just poor shots of a piece of paper being whirled by the wind. It shows that rigorous, almost clinical approach, actively seeking mundane explanations. And when a Nobel winner says it's windblown paper, that carries immense weight. It effectively closed the case on that evidence. So they were actively debunking. And beyond specific cases, the Project Saucer scientists also considered and rejected many of the more, let's say, exotic theories floating around back then.
Oh, yeah. They really grappled with the unknown and the wild public speculation. Experts from MIT, Rand Corporation, physicists, aerodynamicists, they focused on physical rather than psychological explanations.
They considered some really out there stuff, like extraterrestrial animals flying into our atmosphere. Their conclusion: no data turned up to support that arresting idea. Too speculative.
Extraterrestrial animals, okay.
Right. They also studied and rejected the idea that the saucers were hostile aircraft. Their reasoning was telling. The reported performance not only surpassed the development of Russian aircraft, but the development of present fiction science writers. Basically too advanced even for sci-fi back then. They also rejected discs writing on beams or rays, as no known physics supported it. And they even dipped into actual science fiction, didn't they, like H.G. Wells?
Yes, remarkably. They even speculated on whether the anti-gravity shield that H.G. Wells thought up for his novel The First Men in the Moon would work. Their conclusion: it wouldn't.
Shows they were willing to explore just to rule things out. But, crucially, the idea of interplanetary craft visiting us was also discredited, despite its growing popularity.
Why did they discredit the alien spaceship idea back then?
Their reasoning was based on the physics they knew. They thought such ships would have to be so large and unwieldy that they couldn't possibly zigzag as frivolously as the reported saucers did. Plus, they figured spaceships could not carry sufficient fuel to remain for any length of time in the Earth's dense atmosphere. They lacked concepts like advanced propulsion or energy. And there's a curious nuance. The scientists noted a remarkable lack of interest in the rest of the planet from these supposed spacemen. Found that suspicious. Maybe a bit of an anthropocentric bias there, expecting aliens to act like human explorers.
So they ruled out pretty much everything, known and imagined. But there was still that unexplained residue.
Exactly. Even after systematically ruling things out, some sightings remained genuinely baffling. And that pushed some officials behind closed doors to consider more extreme possibilities.
We have a document indicating a real internal shift, despite the public dismissals. A big aha moment showing the split between public messaging and private military concerns.
It absolutely is. Perhaps one of the most revealing documents. Colonel O.M. Young, executive officer to Major General John Samford, the director of Air Force Intelligence. He advised in October 1952 of another recent, extremely creditable sighting. This wasn't just any sighting. A professional photographer took 35 feet of motion picture film of as many as 12 to 16 flying objects.
Motion picture film of multiple objects. That's hard to ignore.
Incredibly hard. Air intelligence, the public-facing part, still felt they were likely optical illusions or atmospheric phenomena. But Colonel Young pointed out something astounding happening internally. Some military officials are seriously considering the possibility of interplanetary ships.
Wow. That's a huge admission from intelligence officials. So despite the public line, the ET hypothesis was seriously on the table internally because some cases were just too unexplainable.
Absolutely. It highlights that internal struggle, the disconnect between the public story and the puzzling reality they faced. General Samford himself, while publicly denying a cover-up, he made an extraordinary statement suggesting someone had achieved unlimited power of such fantastic higher limits that it is a theoretical impossibility by current science.
A top intelligence guy admitting what they saw defied known physics.
Yes, implying a source maybe beyond terrestrial capabilities. It shows that even after extensive investigation and debunking, a core of sighters remained truly anomalous. Captain Edward Reppold, who actually headed Project Blue Book, the successor to Saucer, summed it up perfectly. He said, "If you took any one of these incidents by itself, it might not mean much. But in view of the number and caliber of the informants, you couldn't help taking their accounts seriously." That really captures the dilemma. The sheer weight of credible, unexplained reports from reliable sources was forcing even skeptics to consider possibilities far beyond the conventional, even if they couldn't admit it publicly.
Okay, so not all the reports hitting the FBI's desks were straightforward sightings or military analyses. Some files reveal truly peculiar, almost bizarre claims. There's one about an individual described as sane, sound, making extraordinary claims about peaceful aliens with a warning.
Yeah, that report from August 1952 definitely deviates from the scientific or military stuff. It gives a glimpse into the wilder fringe of public claims. It details someone claiming flying saucers are factual and actual, and even more remarkably, that his associates have been in conversation with the men operating the flying saucers.
Direct conversation with the operators. Wow. What did they supposedly say?
According to the report, these operators wanted high U.S. officials told that they are here on our planet on a peaceful mission and that they are not on a warlike mission. But this peaceful message came with a clear, almost threatening warning. If the U.S. government continues to send fighters, they will disappear.
That's an incredible claim to find in an official file. But the FBI's assessment of the source, sane sound, is also interesting. How did they handle that?
It's fascinating. The document notes the claimant appears to be a perfectly sane, sound individual who operates a very large business. So not dismissed as unstable. Yet, despite the fantastical claim direct alien contact, the FBI decided not to investigate this specific matter further. It highlights the huge range of info they received, from serious military sightings to these highly unusual contact claims. And it shows their pragmatic criteria for what warranted investigation versus what was just logged as intel. They had to triage this flood of weirdness. And it wasn't just contact claims. There were reports about civilian research groups, individuals with unique, sometimes dangerous theories, even inventors, like one claiming his invention had a 60% fatality rate.
Oh yeah, that document really screams Cold War paranoia mixed with pure speculation. It details a post-war foreign inventor claiming his flying apparatuses had a terrifying 60% fatality rate. This inventor said he'd contacted U.S. authorities, even Presidents Truman and Eisenhower. But weirdly, he claimed he kept encountering Russian agents instead, even getting into a fight.
Russian agents intercepting his contact attempts.
Apparently. He also claimed to have discovered the fundamentals of Russian atom physics, some law of nature unknown to America, and secret Russian communications methods. He believed this prevented him getting to the U.S. He'd sent his invention details to the Pentagon but got rejected.
This report, while sounding completely fantastical, perfectly shows how Cold War anxiety intertwined with UFOs. Any unknown tech could be Soviet. It fueled suspicion and a need for intelligence, even from dubious sources. The FBI had to record and assess everything through that security lens.
Another really strange tangent in the files involves Dr. Wilhelm Reich and his controversial orgone energy, mentioned in connection with interplanetary flying objects. How did Reich end up in these files?
That's a truly unusual intersection. Fringe science, eccentric individuals, and national security concerns all bundled together. FBI documents from October 1957 mention Dr. Wilhelm Reich, director of the Wilhelm Reich Institute and Oregon Institute. Highly controversial figure, known for his orgone energy theories, a cosmic life force he claimed to have discovered. The files note he and his staff sent voluminous correspondence to the Bureau and other United States government agencies.
So he was actively contacting the government about his ideas?
Persistently, it seems. While the FBI noted his communications indicated no violations within the investigative jurisdiction of this bureau, the sheer volume suggests he was relentlessly trying to engage them. His theories sometimes touched on atmospheric phenomena, cosmic energies. The document notes Reich was imprisoned in March 1957 and discusses claims by his staff of treason, fraud, perjury, and conspiracy against officials, plus allegations of obstruction of civilian research on the space problem.
So, even if Reich wasn't strictly talking about flying saucers, the context of space problems and maybe his atmospheric theories put upon their radar shows how wide the net was cast.
Precisely. It highlights how various fringe scientific or philosophical movements intersected with the UFO phenomenon in the public mind and thus in official records. Reich's unorthodox theories, his attempts to apply them sometimes to weather, sometimes even claiming to bust UFOs with his cloudbuster device, got him noticed. While the FBI didn't see a criminal case, keeping these files shows their broad intelligence mandate. Collect any info possibly related to national security, even involving unconventional figures making claims about the space problem. It's a snapshot of the wild ideas the UFO phenomenon unleashed. And then there were the actual civilian groups forming, like the International Flying Saucer Bureau, IFSB. These clearly got the FBI's attention too, right? Particularly regarding potential subversion.
Absolutely. This shows how widespread public interest was becoming, and how the government watched not just the skies, but the social movements forming around the sightings. There's a letter from Franklin, Indiana, to the FBI. Someone interested in joining the IFSB, asking if members could join the Civil Defense Program. But crucially, the letter asks if the IFSB was cleared or subversive in any way. That immediately flags the FBI's Cold War dual concern. Understand the phenomena, but also monitor groups for security risks or subversive activity. Were they just curious citizens or a potential problem?
How big was this IFSB group to warrant that kind of attention?
Surprisingly widespread. The letter says Franklin, Indiana was a hub, the only city in the world that has the most members, with 20 city members, 10 from nearby towns. And these weren't just isolated people. Members included police officers, librarians, mechanics, pilots, businessmen, people integrated into the community.
The IFSB had reps across the U.S., Indiana, Minnesota, Illinois, Kentucky, Puerto Rico, D.C., and even internationally in Canada and the U.K. Figures like a retired British Army captain and a clergyman were representatives, lending some perceived credibility.
So a real grassroots movement taking shape.
Definitely. It shows the broad public engagement, the diverse people drawn to it, and the government's concern wasn't just about what was flying overhead. They were watching how people reacted on the ground, especially organized groups. Could they be manipulated, become platforms for weird ideas or dissent? This scrutiny highlights how all these reports, credible, outlandish, organized groups, fed into the ongoing confusion around the flying disc issue, often leaving more questions than answers.
Okay, so even after all the investigations, the debunking attempts, the public dismissals, some cases just wouldn't go away. They remained stubbornly unidentified, often involving radar confirmations that seemed impossible to write off as imagination or weather. That 1952 Washington, D.C. incident really stands out in the files, doesn't it?
Oh, the 1952 DC flap is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence, precisely because it involved multiple confirmations from trained observers and sophisticated radar systems. Edward J. Barnes, from the Air Route Traffic Control Center, reported that for 6 hours on the morning of the 20th of July, 1952, there were at least 10 unidentifiable objects moving above Washington. 6 hours, not just a blip, a sustained, unexplained presence over the Capitol.
And Barnes's assessment, as a professional controller.
Unequivocal. He said, they were not ordinary aircraft, nor, in my opinion, could any natural phenomena account for these spots on our radar, he went on. Neither falling stars, electrical disturbances, nor chemical clouds either. Exactly what they are, I don't know. Now you know as much about them as I do, and your guess is as good as mine.
That's an incredible admission from someone in his position. And it wasn't just that one time, was it? It happened again soon after.
Exactly. The same baffling situation recurred just 6 days later, July 26th, 9:08 p.m. The Air Route Traffic Control Center's radar again showed unidentified objects over D.C. And crucially, ground radar at Andrews Air Force Base independently confirmed them. 2 jet interceptors, F-94s capable of 600-mile-per-hour winds, were scrambled from Delaware. When the jets appeared on radar, controllers guided them towards the objects. One pilot sighted a light off his wing. Barnes confirmed a corresponding pip on his scope. But other pilots saw nothing unusual, and the objects mysteriously disappeared when the jets approached, only to reappear once the jets left.
So multiple radar hits, visual confirmation by a pilot, and active evasion of military jets.
Yes. It defied conventional explanation, highlighted the military's inability to identify or counter these things. It left this profound sense of frustration and bewilderment, a tangible, undeniable puzzle they couldn't solve or explain away. And this persistent inability to explain everything, especially credible events like the DC radar sightings, led to ongoing debate and visible frustration inside official circles. A real split between public talk and internal struggle.
It really shows that internal conflict. In 1957, years after saucers supposedly closed, a news ticker reported testimony before a House Appropriations Subcommittee. The director of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics stated flatly, maybe out of sheer frustration, there's no such thing as a flying saucer. He even suggested the Air Force should just nail down the unidentified flying objects and say it is pure fiction to end the speculation. That's a strong desire to dismiss it, control the narrative.
But not everyone agreed, even at high levels.
No. Conversely, Admiral Delmar S. Farney, retired but respected, who'd been involved in naval aviation, offered a starkly different view. He stated, we have credible reports from credible observers of incredible things.
That perfectly captures the conflict. The push to dismiss versus the undeniable reality of high-quality, unexplained sightings from reliable sources. Managing the narrative versus confronting the raw, confusing data, a tension that would define UFOs for decades.
So to wrap up our deep dive into these truly fascinating early files, our sources contain one final, extraordinary document, offers a completely different interpretation, an ancient one, drawing on biblical texts, really unusual for FBI files.
It truly is. This document found in the files, but notably marked as missing information or communication received, not official analysis, provides this sweeping reinterpretation of the Bible, especially the book of Ezekiel, the core idea that these ancient texts actually describe spaceships and spacemen, not divine beings or metaphors, an attempt to link modern phenomena to ancient scripture.
There's a wild claim to find in there. How does it reinterpret something like Ezekiel's famous vision?
It's incredibly detailed in its parallels. Ezekiel's living creatures, reinterpreted as spacemen, the famously weird wheels, described as spaceships appearing like the gleaming of a chrysolite, a greenish shoe. The document links to contemporary UFO reports, these wheels being full of eyes, interpreted as round openings, portholes, or power outlets all around and within. Claiming this matched modern observer reports, it highlights their maneuverability. darted to and fro like the flash of lightning, moving without turning. Instant direction changes impossible for aircraft. Even the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels is translated as the spacemen carried the ships with them, like a pilot in a craft described by someone from a pre-mechanical age. The fuel. Fire between the whirling wheels.
And it didn't stop with Ezekiel. It connected this to other biblical events, even God.
Oh yes, it extended across foundational narratives, God's presence like birds hovering in Isaiah, reinterpreted as a flying object. Clouds, explicitly called God's chariots, sometimes accompanied by wind, fire, flame. A swift cloud, directly translated as a spaceship. It even connects Lord of Sabaoth to Lord of Hosts or armies, real armies, space armies. Jacob meeting angels of God, reimagined as encountering spacemen, with Jacob declaring, "This is God's army." Most provocatively, Jesus' ascension by a cloud, or spaceship, his prophesied return. On the clouds, spaceships of heaven, space with power and great glory.
Wow.
This document, while definitely an outlier and reflecting a niche view, really underscores the profound impact these sightings had, prompting people to seek answers not just in science, but in ancient religious texts too. It's a testament to the broad cultural reverberations of the UFO phenomenon, forcing people to try and reconcile the unknown with all existing frameworks of understanding.
Hashtag chagged, hey chag outro. So you can clearly see how these early FBI documents really pull back the curtain on a pivotal time. From those urgent calls for identification, the creation of Project Saucer, the meticulous data collection, all the way through credible eyewitness accounts to, well, truly wild theories, and even that astonishing biblical interpretation. The foundations of the modern UFO phenomenon were undeniably laid right here in these files.
It's a remarkable illustration, isn't it? How government agencies grappled with something they just couldn't categorize or fully explain. They were balancing national security concerns with managing public information, often wrestling internally with just how incredible some reports were. That initial confusion, the rigorous data gathering, and then the decision to dismiss publicly while investigating privately, it set a precedent for decades of secrecy that, well, we know continues today.
Yeah, the very act of collecting and keeping all these diverse accounts, from the carefully documented to the utterly bizarre, it speaks volumes about the enduring puzzle.
It really does.
And it leaves us with, I think, a provocative thought. If, even with all the science and intelligence resources back then, some cases remained extremely credible and unexplainable, defying known physics, and if some top military officials genuinely considered interplanetary ships, what does that really tell us about the nature of those early encounters? And maybe more importantly, what does it tell us about the challenges of understanding phenomena that still defy conventional explanation today? It leaves us perpetually curious, doesn't it, about what else might be out there?
Exactly. This deep dive into the official files shows that line between mystery and military was blurry right from the start. The pursuit of truth behind the unexplained was and remains incredibly complex, often shrouded in just enough ambiguity to keep us all questioning. The legacy of 1947 continues to shape our understanding, or maybe our lack of it.
Join us next time on The Deep Dive as we continue to explore the fascinating depths of the unknown.